Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the podcast on the Sicha for Project Likkutei Sichos, where we unpack one of the weekly Sichos and bring it into our real life. I am Rabbi Shmuli Nachlas from Toronto, Canada. I'm joined by a good friend, an old chavrusa from London Yeshiva, Yosef Chaim Brook in Coral Springs, Florida, as well as Rabbis Moshe Gourarie in Toms River, New Jersey. Today, we're going to be discussing, unpacking the Sicha of Chelek Chaf Vav, the first Sicha of Tetzaveh. This is a really an amazing Sicha. Starts off with a lot of nigla and a discussion of Rashi and the Rambam on the Ephod, and finishes with a very interesting thing. Just a little sneak peek into the end with a experience that Rashi had, that he essentially saw something he didn't want to see, and he always wondered, well, why did Hashem put me in that situation? Why would and he was bothered by it. He was really disturbed by it for a long time, until this Rashi, and it really changed everything for him later to be able to see that his learning of Torah was affected by this negative situation, which he wished he could unsee. But anyway, let's get started and let's see what we're talking about here. So Moshe, do you want to set the table for us?
All right. Okay. First of all, Yosef Chaim, Shalom Aleichem. It's good to see you. Really looking forward to hear your take or takeaway from the Sicha. So the discussion in the Sicha is the Ephod. The Ephod is one of the big Kahuna, one of the priestly garments that the Kohen wears. It is basically shaped like a reverse apron. It hangs from approximately the waist down on the back side of the Kohen Gadol. It ties around the front, and then it has sort of these suspenders or these shoulder straps that come up to the shoulders and tie in to these settings of diamonds that were on the shoulders of the Kohen Gadol. The Rebbe points out that Rashi and Rambam seem to be quite similar in describing this beged and describing this garment. And then the Rebbe points out some minor differences that one may look at and say, okay, no, it started from the waist, it started from a little higher, it went down to the knees, it went down to the ankles. Like one may look at it and say, oh, it's very small differences. Yet the Rebbe asks the question, like, what is the root, or what is the source, what is the reason for their differences? And of course the Rebbe goes into a various details that I'm purposely skipping, but the explanation boils down to the fact that Rashi and Rambam are disagreeing on a very fundamental idea, and that is, do we see the Bigdei Kahuna, the garments of the Kohen Gadol, as garments that are ornate, fancy, or do we see them as ornaments that some of them are shaped or worn as garments? In other words, to use the term of the Sicha, is it a beged or is it a tachshit? Now, in the pasuk it says ve'ela habgadim, so obviously there's a beged aspect to it. The pasuk also says lechavod u'lesif ares, for beauty and for glory. So clearly there's this. It's supposed to make the kohen gadol look beautiful and fancy. The question is, what's the emphasis? Levush, a garment, something that's more utilitarian, or a tachshit, something that's more luxury based. And based on that, the Rebbe explains the various differences between Rashi and Rambam. That the way Rashi describes the ephod, it's based on his approach that it was a beged, it was more garment-like, or in the category of garment, whereas the Rambam's description follows his approach that the Bigdei Kahuna were more of a tachshit, more of an ornament, and just some of them were worn as a beged, but its purpose was more for to adorn the kohen than for it to be used as a garment.
Sorry, just to interrupt for 1 second to simplify that question. I think you could say, am I buying this shirt because of the name brand, or am I buying it to wear it because it's a shirt and it happens to be a nice shirt? So how much does that luxury aspect of it connect into our personal into it? Well, here in the kohen, as far as it being a beged or a tachshit, what's the focus?
I think a better example would be a shirt is still a shirt, even if it has a brand name and even if it's a very beautiful shirt. But there's certain things that one might wear, like a coat or an overcoat or a jacket or something like that, that is not needed just to cover his skin, but yet it keeps him warm, or it makes a certain presentation. But is the focus on the use of it, or is the focus on the brand name, like you say, or something else that's on it? Yeah, but that's basically the point. But here, keep in mind that these are extra things above the regular begadim that the Kohen Gadol is wearing.
The interesting thing is that really the argument is not as significant as it may seem, because really a lavush in its essence is meant to cover something up, and an ornament in its essence is meant to show off, which is essentially the very opposite. In this case, both Rashi and the Rambam agree that the Bigdei Kohen Gadol was l'chaved l'sifares. The idea of the begadim, even if you put an emphasis on the fact that it's a beged, it's the whole purpose of it was l'chaved l'sifares, which is very similar to what an ornament's purpose is. So in essence, that argument is actually not as significant in that regard, the way it would be normally if you look at a beged and an ornament at what their core reason for what their purpose of existence is.
So what's this? So if you had to break down really what the Rebbe is trying to emphasize, the difference between the Rambam and Rashi, what's and the Rebbe brings it also, just to add one extra layer to it, the Rebbe also emphasizes the connection between the ephod and the choshen is also personifying that difference. Moshe, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, according to Rashi, if it's a beged, it's a beged. In other words, Rashi, I mean, of course, like Yosef Chaim said, it's the purpose of this beged is to adorn the kohen, to be beautiful. But since Rashi sees it as a more, or classifies it as a garment, he therefore sees the two things as totally different. There's the choshen, is one thing, the ephod is something else. The Rambam is focusing more on the beautification of it, and therefore he sees the ephod and the choshen as together forming one beautiful tachshit, even though in the list of 8 garments they go as 2 separate ones, but as an adornment they complement one another, they tie into each other, they're connected to each other, they're at the same height according to the Rambam. So the Rambam, because he sees it as a tachshit, besides the details of the length of it and the width of it, also its connection to the ephod obviously the choshen was much more of a tachshit than the ephod, because the choshen had these 12 beautiful diamonds on them. So it Rashi says, but still it was on the chest, which is where you normally cover with garments. But the Rambam is seeing it as it's this beautiful plate with these 12 beautiful settings with diamonds inside. So that'll complement the beauty of the ephod, and the ephod, the way it holds it in place, complements the beauty of the choshen. So the Rambam sees them as as two things that are forming one beautiful tachshit, one beautiful ornament, or one beautiful ornamental display.
For Rashi, he doesn't need to have that, because as far as Rashi is concerned, even the begadim are again l'chaved l'sifares. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be together in order for it to express that idea. For the Rambam, because the whole emphasis on the tachshit, the ephod and the choshen have to be connected the entire time, as he writes.
Just so here we have, stepping back, you have this very seemingly analytical breakdown between Rashi and the Rambam about the apron. So before we go further, maybe Yosef Chaim, you want to give us a perspective, like what is this? What's happening here, but not just happening on a technical level, because that we've got. But what's your takeaway? What's happening here with the Rashi and the Rambam? What's the Rebbe teaching us here?
So the interesting thing is that you have two mefarshim here that are looking essentially at the same beged. They're not even arguing so much about the facts, minor details in length and in width, but nothing more than that really. And they're really seeing an entirely different article of clothing as far as perception is concerned. The Rambam is seeing a tachshit, an ornament, and Rashi is seeing a beged. And that, based on that core fundamental perception, their entire understanding of what has to happen in size, what has to happen in terms of priority of which item is put on first, which item is included in the list, if the tzit is included, if the tzit is not included, all of that comes out of the fundamental understanding of what this item, this article of clothing is, which is fascinating. There's how two different people could look at the same exact piece of clothing and see something entirely different. And that has an expression to every one of us in how we see the world, how we understand reality, how we understand Torah, how we understand what to emphasize, what not to emphasize, what's more important, what's a priority. All of that is based on what our fundamental core understanding of something is. And based on that, everything else is a branch off of that tree.
So that leads us right into actually, where's it coming from? Why is it? So that's really a metaphysical perspective on this whole, technical machlekes, if you will. Where is the Rambam coming from, and where is Rashi coming from, and why do they look at the same article of clothing, and one sees red, one sees blue? Like how does that happen? And of course, as you're saying, obviously it's a lesson for us. But what's the background to seeing the same ephod in the same situation and seeing them from a different perspective? And that will answer our other question, almost like, why can me and you walk down the street and see whatever it is that we're looking at, and I'm seeing A and you're seeing B, and we have total different perspectives, and we're coming from what's happening here?
You remember, Shmuli Nachlas, do you remember about 10 years ago or maybe more, there was this image going around online. It was like a dress, and you were being asked, is it blue and silver or is it pink and gold?
Yeah.
And some people were saying, what do you mean it's pink and gold? How could you see any other color? And everyone else saying, what do you mean it's blue and silver? How could you see any other color? And I don't know what the explanation is scientifically, but it does highlight the point that two people could look at the same thing. Interestingly enough, there's a caricature that has the number 6 laying on the floor horizontally, and one person is looking at it from the bottom and screaming it's 6. The other person is looking at it from the top and screaming it's a 9. And they're both right. They're both screaming at each other. It's a 6. How could you see a 9? What do you mean it's a 9? How could you see a 6? And this highlights Yosef Chaim's point a little bit, that the Eibishter created us is that we each have this uniqueness, and based on the way our mind works, the way our past experiences, and whatever the situation might be, that we two people could see the same thing. Almost, I don't want to say elu on regular people, but you're seeing two things, and both stay in emes. They both could be emes.
Yeah, I mean, the question still remains is, why are they seeing it differently? And that's the fascinating human story of everything. I mean, this is what makes the world go round, right? This is the story of our lives, where people have experiences and people see things and people observe situations, like the example you gave, or here, the Rambam, where they're not even at each other's neck. They're not even, like a big Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel debate about fighting about something big. As a matter of fact, they're pretty, they're okay with each other, but still they see things very, very differently. So let's jump in. Yeah.
Are you jumping to the end of the Sicha? Or?
No, I'm just trying. Well, I think that the part I'm going to go to is the Rebbe does explain that Rashi is coming from somewhere. But before I go there, you want to?
I just had a thought while Yosef Chaim was talking. Sometimes things fly into my head, and it's only in Chachma. It's not yet in Bina, so I hope it'll come out sounding okay. But we had a Sicha in the beginning of in Chelek Chaf about Chassidus, the two Mishalim of the Friedrich Rebbe, where one mashal is that it's like mining coals, and another mashal was like lifting up pearls from the sea of the bed of the ocean. And the Rebbe explains basically is that there's one way of looking at it that it's a necessity, like coals, and that's referring to the fact of why we need Chassidus and Galus. And then there's another point, and that is that Chassidus is a luxury, and it's a achana to the coming of Mashiach, when everything is going to be on a luxurious level. I mean, that's in short. I'm thinking of somehow of breaking down two perspectives in life. When someone will look at something, maybe Torah or mitzvahs, a person will look at it as a necessity. It's part of being who I am. And someone else will look at it and say, obviously the basics are the basics, but it's attached. It's something that enhances my life. It's not integral to my life, or certainly hidur mitzvah and learning chassidus. And maybe, and I don't want to go Rashi Rambam because I this is totally not thought through. But Rashi is Pshutei Shel Mikra. From the perspective of Pshat, Teiru mitzvahs is the most basic thing in our world. It's necessary for living. Whereas Rambam might be seeing more as Rambam was he worked for the king. He was a doctor. He saw life more from a more luxurious perspective, or which and sees that there's also a tachshit aspect. It enhances the life. It's not just basic. Maybe if either of you want to take this somewhere, because I'm just
like I was saying before, I think that is really beautiful. Even Rashi, who thinks that it's a beged, still believes that the beged is lechaved l'sefaris, which means even if you want to stick to the basics, to Pshuta Shemikra, the Pshuta Shemikra also has to be enhanced to the point where it's also lechaved l'sefaris. It's not enough for it to just be to remain in the realm of Pshuta Shemikra in a beged.
Which is the Rebbe's chiddush in Rashi, that Pshat really entails Remez and Drush and Sod. Once you see it as integral, as basic, it could include so much more, which is a perfect segue to the end of the Sicha. I'll let you take it.
Well, I just want to add to that point one last thing, and that is about what you're saying, which is beautiful, is that even someone who's not seeing things as luxurious, and even someone who's seeing every day-to-day life of Torah mitzvahs as very basic and pshuta shel mikra, I think that there's what you're saying here is that even that person, the chiddush here, even that person should take a moment in their life to recognize the chiddush of Rashi that brings so much richness to our life, and that glorifies our life, and that we don't often. I was talking to someone recently who's going through a very difficult time, without getting into details, life and death issues and things like this. And we were just talking about the fact that simple things that we take for granted, like emunah, hashgacha pratis, and that the Eibusher, things that we have which are day-to-day basics, pshutei shel mikra, we have them ingrained inside of us in a way that is we have to sometimes take the time to realize that this is really the Chavod al-Safaris. It's so enhancing to our life without even realizing it. It's almost not a luxury. It's not even a fancy garment that we put on. So within that Pshutei Shel Mikra, within that day to day, there's the Chavod al-Safaris. Anyway, just a beautiful point. Anyway, so jumping ahead to really what Yosef Chaim was saying before is, so they're coming from different perspectives, but why? And the Rebbe says that at least the Rebbe explains in the Sicha that Rashi, when he was younger, I guess, or earlier on.
So let's just let's just insert here that Rashi says when he's describing the ephod, Rashi uses a very specific example, and that is that it's like the reverse aprons that the noble women wear when they ride their horses. And Rashi uses that to explain, that it's similar to a lavush again. But that's the example Rashi gives, and the Rebbe tells a beautiful story that is often told by the teachers that is associated to this description. Go ahead, Shmuli.
Well, maybe you'll share the story, but before you do, I find something, just a total side point in the Sicha. The Rebbe says about this story, which we're about to share, that every Ben Chamish L'Mikra, when you're learning this in Cheder, certainly the Rebbe, you were taught this when you learned this Rashi. I don't know, were any of you taught this story? I wasn't taught this story. The Rebbe takes for granted that everybody in Cheder learned this story. But anyway, that I thought that was like, the Rebbe sets the bar so high in the Pshutei Shel Mikra for the Ben Chamish. Of course you learned this in Cheder, and everybody knows it, and then goes on. Anyway, Michael, share the story with us. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So the story in short is that when Rashi was younger, he saw a noblewoman riding on a horse, wearing an ephod-like apron, and it bothered Rashi that he had to see something that was not properly tznius. The Rebbe actually, references a Gemara that a woman riding a horse is not tznius, and therefore they don't use the term merkav in halacha. They use the term moshav because it's more sounds more modest. And yet, when Rashi came to to explain the ephod, he realized that this sight that he had seen actually helped him envision and explain what the ephod is, and it turned a something that began as a negative thing into something positive. That's how, in short, what the Rebbe tells.
Yeah, so just to break that down a little bit before we delve into it, I mean, here you have a situation where Rashi, the Rebbe says, the story is that he was mitzar for a long time. It bothered him. Why did he have to have this experience, which was not something he was looking for? It's not something he wanted. I mean, before you go further, just that concept, I think there's value to just taking a moment, especially in the world of social media that we live in today, and how everything is just popping up in front of our face. I remember, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I remember a story of once, I think Fitcha Itkin used to bring, but this, at least, this is where I heard at least, that Chassidim of the Frierdiker Rebbe, when they came to America, they asked, what's Mesiras Nefesh today? Because the old school Mesiras Nefesh literally meant, no food, taken to the gulag. I mean, depends which era of the communism and so on and so forth. You're talking about, serious levels of Mesiras Nefesh, which actually, and giving your life for that. And here in America, what is this? I asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, how do we? And the answer that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave was Mesiras Nefesh Heint is nish kuken v'medarfnet, which I know that's not the theme of the Sicha, but it's just something that popped into my mind. And if it was that case in the 1940s, I mean, today the world we live in, it's not even willingly, it's not even a thing. You pop open your computer, you pop open, want to go to watch a shared project with the Sichos on YouTube, and like it's almost like, the value, just for a second, the value of controlling the intake visually of what we look at. I just want to take a moment to stop and talk about that for a second. We're all very conscious about the food intake, right? Especially now, we're changing, we're looking at what is really in food and is it healthy for you and is it not? And everybody's aware of the fact that if you're going to eat certain foods, how they're going to affect, how they're going to make you feel. And that makes sense. But there's other senses of ours that are intake. There's touch, there's feel, there's eyesight, there's hearing, so it's not just what you're eating in your mouth. And if you think for a second about that for a moment, what you take in and what you listen to, of course, we know about, Lashon Hara and all that, but it's not just about Lashon Hara. And I mean, that's important, but you're taking it into yourself. You're making it as part of yourself. What you see, you can't unsee later. So you talk about, our children and the education of what they're watching on the computer or what they're watching on the screen. And I mean, this conversation could go on and on and on, but it highlights the importance of being cognizant of this is my life. This is my brain. This is my heart. I want to be in control of what I want to bring into that. I don't want someone else just saying, hey, look at this. No, I don't want to see that. I'd rather not see that. I can never unsee it once I see it, right? I can never unhear what I just heard. So it's worthwhile before we hear, we see, before we open ourselves up to all that junk, is think of it as food, as intake. I don't know. Anyway, so back to the story for a second.
Just to add to exactly what you're saying, there's a Sicha from the Rebbe on the pasuk, Shoiftim v'shoitrim titin lecha b'chol sha'arecha. Sha'arecha literally means in your cities. But Sharecha also means gateways, and gateways means gateways into your life, into your psyche, into your things. And Shaftim v'Shaitim, every time you have to judge and you have to enforce the judgment before you allow anything into you, into either any of your, whether it's your mouth, whether it's your eyes, whether it's your ears. Shaftim v'Shaitim titin lecha. You have to judge and allow yourself. And ask yourself if this is something that's allowed in, and if it's not, there's a famous story of the story of the Baal Shem Tov, that he Chassid came to the Baal Shem Tov and he said, what should I do? I have machshavos, thoughts are flying through my head. I can't control it. So he said, for that you have to go to this and this Chassid. So he traveled a little while and he came in the middle of the night and it was cold outside, and he knocked and he knocked and he knocked and he could hear that there's people inside and they're not opening the door. So after a while he gave up and he went to the shul and he slept in the shul. The next morning after Shachris he went back to this Chassid. The Baal Shem Tov told him to go. So he knocked on the door and they opened the door and they let him in and he gave him breakfast. breakfast, and he said, "What brings you here?" He said, "Baal Shem Tov sent me to teach you to I should learn from you how to control my machshava." He says, "That I already taught you last night." He said, "Last night?" He says, "Yeah, you were knocking on the door, but I'm the balabas here. I didn't let you in. The machshavas come knocking on the door. You're the balabas. You're the owner. You don't want to let them in. Don't let them in." Now I know that for us it's easier said than done, but it reminds you that sometimes we give in so quickly to the rush of things heading away. Sometimes we need to be reminded. This is my life. I'm the balabas, and I want to shut the door, lock the door. I'm not letting you in. Anyway, so that's just an hisafa on what you were saying.
Yosef Chaim,
Yeah.
moving over to you.
So at the end of the Sicha, the Rebbe brings that story, obviously, that everybody's should have learned in the Ben Chamish status. And then the Rebbe adds to the story. So the story itself is simple. Rashi saw something that he didn't think he should have seen, and he was upset about it. And then later in life, he understood why he saw the story. Seemingly, that's enough to explain the whole thing. He had to understand what an ephod is. That's why he was shown an ephod, even though it wasn't an appropriate sight to be seen by Rashi. But then the Rebbe goes a step further and explains why Rashi uses the words "v'libi oimerli." And the Rebbe explains that because Rashi had a lot of pain as a result of seeing this sight, that's how he came about to understanding what an ephod is, not because he saw the ephod. The story itself seems to say he saw the Saras Reichvitz al Asusim. Based on that, he just used that sight that he saw X amount of years earlier and applied it to Torah. The Rebbe explains it entirely differently, that the connection between the Saras Reichvitz al Asusim, the fact that Rashi was able to take that sight and apply that to the ephod, that came as a result of the tsar that he had from seeing that scene. The Yisr and the that came as a result of that Choshech, that's what gave him the insight, the wisdom to understand that is what the ephod was. And that's why he used the term Libi Omerli, which is connected to Yechidah Nefesh, which is connected to, I guess, the pain. And that's why he uses that term, because many times Rashi does not use it. When Rashi wants to say an opinion of his own, he uses Vani Omer. And here he uses the term Libi Omerli. Libi Omerli, Leiv Nishbar. So just as a personal lesson, in order to arrive at wisdom, in order to arrive at understanding things deeper, you arrive there through adversity. To understand Torah in a deeper level, to understand different parts of life in a deeper level, the way you arrive there is by having adversity, by having pain, by having darkness. That's how you come there. That's, I think, the lesson that's being said in this story, beyond the technical details of seeing the ephod being worn by somebody else in Rashi's times to apply to to apply to Torah.
Is that more scary to us, or is that more comforting?
I think it's comforting, because I think it speaks to the reality of life for every individual living at any time in history.
It's very powerful, because like classically, when you go through that difficult time, and for Rashi, it was seeing something he wanted to unsee, which he could unsee. There's regret, there's remorse, there's anger, there's upsetness, there's so many emotional feelings of disappointment of whatever that circumstance of experience that a person is experiencing at that time. And here we're saying to the person that don't shun that, don't be upset with yourself, that don't blame yourself, don't feel guilty, don't I mean, there is a certain sense of pain because it's a reality. You can't change that. And Rashi was still, but why? Why is okay? The feelings of not understanding are validated and real. And Rashi felt that for a long, long time, is what the Rebbe was saying here, which is a very powerful explanation of what was going on in Rashi. And Rashi's Rashi. Yet here we're saying is not only was it b'hashgacha pratis and was it for a reason, but
that's where the story stops. Essentially, the Ben Chamish Lemikra story stops right there. There was hashgacha pratis, there was a reason for it, and it was applied later. And a whole different place.
And everything has hashgacha pratis. That's obvious, right? Here it's saying further is that the development of Rashi and his whole persona and his perspective, going back to your original question of why did Rashi see it different than the Rambam? You know why? Because he had a living experience that the Eibusher gave him,
a personal experience.
A personal experience that the Eibusher put him through of tsar and of an experience that he had, which therefore is why he's seeing things and why he's learning Torah the way he is.
Exactly.
So I'll begin the conclusion by making a comparison or a connection between this Sicha and the other Sicha we're learning this week. And at the very, very end of the other Sicha, which is Tetzaveh Zayin Oder, the Rebbe learns a lesson from the Gematria of the word Tetzaveh. That the 501, the one above 500 represents the essence, and that after the...
My name is Usher. I learned something very special this Sicha. Usher is also 501. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. If you will, in the discussion of Gematria, and when the Rebbe said that it's not a Sada Prutza, it's not an open field to just pick Gematrias, happens to be that Moshe Gourarie, spelled out properly, is the Gematria 770.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
going back to the point I was making, the Rebbe learns a message from the Gematria. The Gematria is the in English you say the numerical value or the numerical equivalence of the word Tetzaveh and of the number of psukim in the parsha. And this teaches us, without going into the depth of the Sicha, that the essence of Moshe continues, and the essence of a tzaddik continues even after his physical life on this earth. And the Rebbe says, why does it have to come through a Gematria? And the Rebbe says, because the greater the revelation, the greater the detour it takes, or the greater the helam, the greater the concealment that it needs to take in order for the ultimate revelation, the ultimate truth, for it to come out. So since it's such a major point that the life of the tzaddik carries on beyond his time on this earth, the only way to express that, the etzem of the tzaddik, is through the concept of gematria. And I see that same thing in the point that Yosef Chaim is making from the Sicha, that it's because Rashi went through this pain, that is what pushed him, that is what gave him that whole new perspective. In other words, had he seen it and moved on, he may not have necessarily made that connection, or certainly it may not have enhanced his learning as much as the fact that because it was a point of tsar, because he had to reach into his yichidish benefesh to be able to figure out, what do I do with this? It's the tsar part, it's the pain part that actually triggered this incredible growth in understanding and teaching Torah. And of course, when I taught the second Sicha, I said, what we're waiting for, of course, is the Geula, and seemingly we have to go through this hell, through this darkness of Galus. But now that we already have done so, we have the Tsar, where each person in their own level, and then collectively as Yidden, we're experiencing a collective Tsar of Galus. I think it's about ready for us to reach the revelation and the Gadlus Sheni, the elevation that comes after this crushing of the olive, and may we see the Geula, the Meher of Yameinu.
Yosef Chaim, before we wrap up, I want to ask you to just finish off with some final reflections, applications, lessons for anybody.
Just on that term, the Libi Omerli, if you want to be in a place where you can listen to your heart, where your heart can provide wisdom, when your heart can provide insight, and when you can trust your instincts, so to speak, that only comes after negative experiences, out of pain, out of adversity. That's when you become somebody where your Velibi Omerli is significant and has real value. Otherwise, like, essentially that's the explanation why Rashi used this specific term in this explanation. I guess to us, how we can apply that idea personally, that's when you have a Lev Nishbar, Venitka, that's a Libi Omerli that's worth listening to.
I want to finish off by saying that a message to all those who are listening, and a bracha and a wish to everybody, various steps. Number one, if you're going through an experience which seems difficult and painful, Rashi's teaching us, the Rebbe is teaching us here that it's B'hashgacha Pratis, and we're also learning here that the approach that the Rebbe is teaching us is to embrace it, to be bothered by it, and that's okay, and that's part of the process. It's part of something that is going to help us grow and mature into who we are, into a heart that knows. Dig deep into yourself, because that's what we're supposed to be doing, and it'll also enhance your Torah, and it'll help shape your teaching and your influence on other people in a positive way. And if I can, I'd like to finish off with saying that in this Sicha we see the full circle, and you're able to smile and say, "Look how beautiful it is." Rashi was able to smile at the end and say, I got it, the full circle. So the Rebbe very often finish off his Sicha saying it should be b'toiv hanirav hanigla, that we shouldn't have to have the story of the Tsar anymore, and we should be able to see the full circle and be able to say, okay, I see the miracles, I see the beauty, I see the brachas at the end of everything, and how everything is for a greater purpose and greater good, ultimately, to bring Mashiach and Eretz Hashem.
Amen. Beautiful, Shmuli.
All right.
Yosef Chaim. It's very nice.
Yosef Chaim, you're hired. All right. Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.
All right.